Welcome to Fantasy Football today. DFS, I am Sia Najad, joined as always at 11 o'clock on Fridays by Mike McClure. Mike, we just got off the early edge. We've got this wild card slate. We got basically a 2-game Saturday slate. We got a 3-game Sunday slate and effectively a showdown slate Monday. I think that's how most people are playing it. What are you most excited about with this slate? Is it the 3-game? I think you had referred to it as like the flagship slate on DraftKings.
Yeah, definitely most excited about the 3-game slate. Always excited about a showdown slate as well, but definitely the 3-game slate is going to be interesting. I mean, they're all going to be interesting for different reasons. So when you look at the Saturday slate, for example, you get one extreme weather game, one dome game, and then you get 2 dome games and an extreme weather game on Sunday. So that's going to really sway ownership in a big way. So I think there are some very interesting tournament angles if you're willing to invest in those areas.
I love it. And by the way, I think we could go right to the Saturday slate. I mean, again, I think that's how people are consuming their contest. And by the way, we have our contest. It's in the description. If you're watching this live, it'll be in the podcast description as well. We just did a contest for the Sunday slate. It was only a 150-person contest that I created there. So get in there now if you can. Let's talk about the Saturday slate first, though, Mike. I think what's so interesting, I mean, you talked about Houston and that curated, indoor environment, and you got the Chiefs in freezing temperatures. And yet the totals on these games, unless they've moved, and they've moved a little bit, the totals on these games are virtually the same. I find that very interesting because, I think most people are going to want to go to the Browns-Texans game for obvious reasons. But is there an opportunity perhaps to go to that Kansas City game and really load up on that one?
I definitely think there's a possibility for sure. You've got some underpriced superstar talent in that game. It is fascinating that the totals are the same, though. I will say that. I think that some of it is just that Kansas City game is so difficult to price a total on, just because we know how explosive Miami can be in certain conditions. We know how good Kansas City can be. Kansas City's got a great defense as well. So, the short answer is yes, you can definitely play Kansas City-Miami game still.
Yeah, it's a 44.5 point total in that Texans game, by the way, and 43 in the Chiefs-Dolphins game. Let's talk about the Browns-Texans game first, though, because I'm going to be playing the 2-game slate on Saturday, and it's hard for me to get away from Joe Flacco. I like Joe Flacco stacks personally. I know he's a gunslinger. I know he might turn the ball over. But I also know the target share is probably going to be relatively condensed between Amari Cooper, maybe a little bit Elijah Moore, David Njoku. I think we have to still wait and see who's healthy on the Houston side. But obviously, CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, certainly in play. If Noah Brown is playing, that's obviously going to be in play. Robert Woods. What are the pieces in this game you like the most? And I didn't even mention Jerome Ford at 5,500 and Devin Singletary at 5,700. If I'm playing the 2-game slate, what pieces am I taking from this particular game?
Well, I think one thing instantly right off the bat that I think would be what I'm most interested in, I like Joe Flacco. I think he's been fantastic. I think it's been a great story. But when you look at this, we know Cleveland's been the best defense in the NFL. Kansas City's a great defense playing with big weather implications at home. So I think the most immediate thing that you could do that would be contrarian would be to consider playing the Houston Texans defense and betting on 38-year-old Joe Flacco to be 38-year-old Joe Flacco. I think that's something that is going to be fascinating for me because I'm projecting that, it's basically Dolphins and Texans in terms of the 2 lower owned defenses on there. But as far as like my overall exposure to this game, I would say, believe it or not, Devin Singletary is still going to be one of the first pieces in. I think he's still going to touch the football enough. The price point at 5,700, you have to play. So that's what's different about these 2-game slates versus a showdown slate, which we'll talk about on that Monday slate. Monday slate, you may not want to play a guy like, if this were a 1-game, you may not want to play Devin Singletary. But because you're required to play a minimum of 2 running backs, things change drastically there. So Singletary is actually the first guy in my lineup from this game. After that, it would be Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, Elijah Moore, Amari Cooper can all make the player pool. I think a popular build will probably be Dalton Schultz and David Njoku double tight end lineups. So I think that immediately makes an elite play like Travis Kelce in terms of ceiling. fascinating on this slate.
Very interesting. And by the way, Singletary statistically didn't have a great day last week against the Colts, which really surprised me. I had his I had a prop on his rushing and receiving total, but he got a ton of work. So it's certainly a great situation for Singletary to get all kinds of volume. He didn't get as much volume in the passing game as I expected against the Colts, but the 4 or 5 games prior to that, he was getting 3-4 receptions, not just targets in those games. So really good spot at 5,700. All right. So we'll bounce back and forth between these two Saturday games, because let's just say you're grabbing Singletary. Let's say you're grabbing the Texans defense. I mean, you're not doing that in every lineup, but
right.
Where is most of your exposure? Is it in this Dolphins Chiefs game, or is it in the Browns Texans game?
Most of it's looking like it's still going to be in the Browns Texans game. So like Collins, Schultz, Singletary looking to be in pretty much every build for me when I run initially. The thing that I would comment on with the Texans defense, on a 2-game slate, you can absolutely play a defense against your quarterback. In fact, I think there's a solid shot that it could be optimal in this situation, playing Joe Flacco against the Texans defense. And the scenario where that happens, we've seen Flacco turn the ball over a lot. So the scenario where this works is Flacco throws the pick 6, there's a fumble, whatever it is, and then they're instantly in a trailing game script and continuing to throw the football all day. Meanwhile, Kansas City rolls with the rushing game, Tua struggles. All of a sudden, you've got Joe Flacco as the optimal quarterback and the Texans defense as the optimal defense. So do not rule that out.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason you and I were on HQ last night. It's part of the reason I liked the Browns team total over 23.5, because it insulates you from, that bad Flacco throw. Bad, or like maybe there's multiple bad Flacco throws. It creates a short field for Houston. And now all of a sudden you got a negative game script for Joe Flacco for, the balance of the game, and he can put up some points there. So absolutely love that. All right. Moving to the Dolphins plus 3.5 at the Chiefs. As I want to be as contrarian as the next guy, but it's hard for me to consider Tua, but at 7,000. But, again, he does have Tyreek Hill available to him. He does have, it looks like, I don't know about Mostert. It looks like Achane, Jeff Wilson available to him. And then, the said Wilson, like we'll see how it goes there. I don't think Jalen Waddle's playing. Smythe is obviously a potential target as well. Any instance where you would get to Tua here?
No shot.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no chance on Tua. There's a couple reasons. The weather, obviously, one. Kansas City is a very good defense. They've been frustrating offensively this season. They're still one of the best defenses in the NFL, which makes them insanely dangerous when you give them home field like this. Mm-hmm. But the Tua situation, can Miami win this game? Absolutely. Is Miami winning this game in these conditions because Tua throws for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns? I don't think so. I think it's because their defense steps up. They make a special teams play. Patrick Mahomes, has a tipped interception, things like that. That's the scenario where the Dolphins win. I do not see the scenario where it's just Tua out there slinging the ball everywhere and they're running it up, scoring 30-plus points. So I would not play Tua under any circumstance here.
So if you're not building, let's assume you're not building a Flacco stack or a Stroud stack. I mean, are you considering a Mahomes stack? I mean, there are, obviously, you can stack Mahomes with Pacheco, who gets targets. You can stack him with, in the same lineup. You can stack him with Travis Kelce. You can pick one of those kind of third-tier receivers to stack him with. Are Mahomes stacks in play for you?
Definitely. I will say I do have a lot of Flacco, despite liking the Texans defense. So as far when I run my builds right now, I'm getting 50% Flacco, 40% Mahomes, and 10% CJ Stroud. So I'm taking Stroud's pass catchers. I think that they've got insanely high floors. I think we know where the targets are going. So we know that Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz are going to get targets. I want to capture some of the upside with Flacco and that team total, who I think he can spread his weapons out just a little bit more. I know it sounds crazy because he had such great chemistry with Amari Cooper and Njoku, but that's where I see it. So I have a lot of Flacco and a lot of Mahomes, a little bit of Stroud.
A lot of Flacco, a lot of Mahomes, a little bit of Stroud. All right. So in the Mahomes stacks, are you like, listen, it's a 2-game slate. So we already know we've been through these 2-game slates before, 3-game slates. We already know we can just like really get crazy with these stacks. And I understand in this 2-game slate, you probably want to get pieces of both games, but what does a typical Mahomes stack look like on this 2-game slate? Is it with Pacheco? Is it with Kelsey and another pass catcher? Or are you kind of diversifying a little bit more because you like so much in that Cleveland Browns game?
Yeah, I like so much in the Cleveland Browns game. So when I go to like my top Mahomes lineup, it's literally just Mahomes, Pacheco, and the Kansas City defense.
Hmm.
And the Kansas City defense and Mahomes are actually pretty correlated. Uh, Setting up some shorter fields, still potentially looking at scoring those touchdowns. Um, on a 2-game slate. So I like the scenario where Kansas City just has a great day, limits Miami. Some of those shorter fields turn into touchdowns for Mahomes. So that's where my first build is. I do have another one here where I have Mahomes, Pacheco, Rice, Kelsey, and the Chiefs D. So that's a full-on
Hmm.
onslaught. I'll read that lineup too. I know we don't like to get into sharing full lineups, but I think it's an interesting build here. It's Mahomes, Singletary, Pacheco, Elijah Moore, Amari Cooper, Rashee Rice, Dalton Schultz, Travis Kelce, and the Chiefs defense. So you're fading Nico Collins, looking to grab Schultz and Singletary, and then you're having the two receivers, Elijah Moore and Amari Cooper, in that Texans game.
Very interesting. On the Dolphins side, I think you can make the argument for Achane. I think you could even make the argument for Jeff Wilson at 4,200 if Mostert isn't playing. I don't know that we have confirmation on that yet. Tyreek Hill is 8,700. I don't know that Waddle's going to play. He's 6,500. Is this a situation where you might, because I heard you when you said Tua, no shot. Is this a situation where you might be fading all of the Dolphins?
It is so far, Sia. I think the only scenario, which is somewhat similar to that Browns and Texans scenario, is I think you can make a case for the defense. It's a defense playing on the road, but it is in extreme weather conditions. And the benefit to this, one thing we've seen out of the Kansas City Chiefs, they have the unique ability to drive the football down the field and just chew the clock. And I know that that's going to be in their interest here. So you get these scenarios where Kansas City could have a 6 to 7 minute drive that either ends in a field goal, a missed field goal in these conditions, a red zone turnover, whatever it may be. All of a sudden, Kansas City might win this game 17-10 or 20-17 with a turnover or two. If you do that, the Dolphins could very well be the optimal defense if we get the shootout in that Browns-Texans game that doesn't have turnovers. The Dolphins are very live to be relevant defensively still. So that is where I will be playing them. But that's it.
Any of those sort of secondary pass catchers on the Kansas City side that you'd even consider? And I'm going to like Noah Gray, Justin Watson, maybe even like a Richie James, Marcus Valdez-Scantling. I mean, we're getting kind of very speculative when we get to those guys. Is it worth to? I don't know that it's because there's value, I think, across both of these games. Is it worth throwing one of those guys into a Mahomes stack, or are you not getting there?
I don't mind it. I think the issue is with Kansas City, it's just so difficult to tell who it's going to be.
Yeah.
So because of that, like if you're playing 150 lineups or like 20 plus and really trying to attack the tournaments, then yeah, absolutely. I would not only say it's okay, I would recommend it. And I would recommend having a build. This slate projects as one where you could definitely leave some salary on the table. Like the lineups fit nicely where most of them are using almost all the salary. I think that there are absolutely scenarios where you can leave $1,000 of salary and one of those guys outscores Elijah Moore. Like I think it's very, very possible. My problem with it is I think Kansas City is going to chew clock. It's going to be a heavy dose of Isaiah Pacheco. And I think that you're really betting on one of those deep shots. So as much as I dislike the guy and how frustrating he's been, it would probably be MVS who would potentially get that deep target. Otherwise, with Kansas City, it's mostly stuff around the line of scrimmage. So, and you're not going to get there through volume with those kind of players. So it'd have to be a real vertical threat, which I think MVS is probably the only one.
And before we move on to Sunday, because you mentioned Pacheco again, your favorite two running backs on the Saturday slate, is it Pacheco and Singletary?
Definitely. Pacheco, number one by a considerable margin. Singletary, while I say first in the lineup because you have to have two of them, I would consider pivoting off of him before Pacheco. I think there's no scenario in which Pacheco would not be in my lineup. I would eat the chalk on that. I'm showing about 60% owned. I think if you're playing a cash game, you'll be 95% owned. I think that in tournaments, it'll probably be closer to 80.
All right. Let's move on to Sunday because we have three games, two of them very high octane. So I'm very, very curious, and we're going to get to your top three at each position. We're probably not going to do cheat sheets because it's just kind of weird with the two different slates. But top three at each position for Mike will be very revealing when it comes to this Sunday slate because again, a lot to talk about there. Let's cover that. But before we do that, let's hear a message from our partners. It's Reno says this Friday hour has been a great baseline for my DFS and prop bets all year. Great content, guys. I really appreciate that. Yeah, there's a lot of spillover to the prop market for sure when you're talking DFS. And everybody knows that at Sportsline, we do a lot of prop work as well. So these things do correlate to a very large degree. And by the way, if you agree with Reno, hit the like button, please, or go ahead and review the podcast on Apple Pods. All right, let's start with the Steelers plus 10 at the Bills, 35.5 point total. Obviously, this is the least sexy of the three games. The other two on the Sunday slate have totals of 50 or higher. You know, that maybe that means we'll spend a little bit less time on this game. I do think Josh Allen is still viable to potentially play. Maybe it'll end up being contrarian, obviously, but in DFS, because I do think he's going to run the ball a lot. And, I don't know, we could still have 2 touchdown passes. You got James Cook here at 6,600. Najee and Jaylen Warren 5,400 and 5,100 respectively. Is this one of those games, Mike, where we don't need to spend a ton of time on it because it's just such a different game environment than the other two?
I would say so. Yeah. I think that, you want to play Josh Allen, go for it. I think that it's not a comfortable fade, frankly, because as you mentioned, they're going to keep the football in his hands. Like, especially if the game's remotely close, he's going to run the football a ton. You mentioned 2 passing touchdowns. I think he's live for 2 rushing touchdowns as well.
Yeah.
I honestly, like, with Cook, maybe Leonard Fournette gets the goal line work, but I don't think Cook's going to get that goal line work. I think we're not going to have another change of hands with the football. It's Josh Allen's game if things are tight at all in any way. So I like the Bills defense. I will say the Steelers defense is absolutely in play, though.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. And for the record, the implied total for the Buffalo Bills, it's not like anything spectacular, but just to give you some perspective, it's 22.75, which is higher for the record than the Green Bay Packers, who might, that might be a stack people are interested in. So just to give you some perspective there, the Bills 22.75, not a terrible implied total for them. Okay, so we might circle back to this game, but I'd really like to get to the Packers Cowboys because I think that game and the Rams Lions is where a lot of the player pool is going to be for Mike and for myself. So let's start with the Packers plus 7.5 at the Cowboys, 50.5 point total. I mean, oh, by the way, this is probably plus 7 now. I think this has moved down to Packers plus 7. But either way, we've got Jordan Love at 6,300, Dak Prescott at 7,600, CeeDee Lamb 9,000, and we have those sort of secondary options for the Cowboys. I think what's confusing a little bit about Jordan Love is, okay, if Christian Watson is back, but even if he's not back, I do think he's trending towards playing. But there's so many receivers Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, if he's healthy, he's got a bevy. Romeo Doubs, if he's healthy, he's got a bevy of pass catchers. So it makes me a little less interested in stacking Jordan Love, and I certainly like the Dak stacks with CeeDee Lamb. What do you like in this game? I didn't even mention Aaron Jones yet, who should have a big game.
Yeah, Aaron Jones has looked phenomenal since returning. Like really, really, really good. The same athlete that we were used to seeing, I think that he is absolutely in play. The volume, you've got to love it. When you look at the volume, he's had 20 plus carries in each of the last 3 games and still getting work in the passing game. He has not landed in the end zone yet in those particular games and still averaging 19 fantasy points. So he's got probably the biggest ceiling out of anyone not named CeeDee Lamb on this slate, in my opinion. So wow. I think that, you could talk that about Cooper Kupp, Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua. I think those 3 eat into each other enough. I don't think anyone eats into Aaron Jones other than potentially an injury, right? I think that he's cleared. I think I think he's clearly 30-point upside. So I love Aaron Jones here. I do like Jordan Love. So I
Mhm.
talked about this a little bit with Flacco and the Browns more in the betting market. There are certain teams that we're just so used to like seeing in their environments and wanting them in their environments. The Browns are a team it's a gritty, hard-nosed defensive team, physical team. You want to back that team typically outdoors in ugly, sloppy football games. We are used to thinking that about the Green Bay Packers because of what we've seen in history from them. I don't think that's true with this version. With Jordan Love at quarterback, we've seen him want to throw the deep ball, right? What's the best time to throw a deep ball? In a dome, in a controlled environment where there is no
Mhm.
elements impacting anything. I think this Green Bay Packers team is going to thrive in the dome. So I went back and looked at how they played in controlled environments. They only got to do it 4 times this year. He is averaging over 20 fantasy points a game in all of those dome games. The offense scores about 26 points a game in those dome games. They crush when they play in that controlled environment. So I do like Jordan Love here. Um, I will speculate that he will run the football a little bit himself once things are on the line in the playoffs.
And what's interesting about those controlled environments is Jordan Love has gotten better and better this entire season. So a lot of those controlled environment games were like in the middle of the season. Maybe I think at least one of them was in the beginning of the season. So he has made a progression that I didn't see. Like, listen, I was borderline like making fun of this guy the last year and the year before that when he got drafted and early in the season. In the sense, I wasn't making fun of him, but in the sense
Yep.
of him being like a legitimate starting quarterback, I wasn't there with Jordan Love, and clearly I got to take the L on that one because I think he's given us enough of a sample size for me to say, all right, this guy like can be somewhat confident at the quarterback position in their future. If you're doing a Jordan Love stack, I'm very intrigued by what you're going to do here because I, my guess is if you're doing a Jordan Love stack, you're stacking him with Aaron Jones potentially.
Yep.
And then you're taking potentially like a cheap wide receiver, like a Dontavian Wicks at 4,800, or a somewhat reasonably priced Jaden Reed at 5,700. So, what would that Jordan Love stack look like?
I'm glad you asked. I think it's an interesting build. So I'm not going to go heavy Packers despite having Jordan Love. I think that some of that stuff's going to get spread out depending on, what the game script looks like. So for me, it is Jordan Love, Aaron Jones. When you get these two, you're likely getting exposure outside of one of the receivers rushing a touchdown, which is very possible. You're getting exposure to essentially every Green Bay score. And the reason I like that is they play well in these domes. They're likely going to be trailing, playing with some sense of urgency. I think that is the scenario that you want to attack. So I've got one here with Jordan Love and Aaron Jones. And then I've got one with Jordan Love, Aaron Jones, and then Tucker Kraft, the tight end, who I think is actually very viable
Mhm.
at 3,300. And that is a lineup where it is a double tight end, Tucker Kraft running it back with Jake Ferguson on the other side. When you're able to do that, you're able to play CeeDee Lamb very easily in this game as well. So I like the Jordan Love builds, but I don't think you need to force guys like Wicks into the lineup. I think that you're better off just playing Jordan Love, Aaron Jones, and hoping he has a big day that's kind of Jones gets his 1 touchdown, 100 plus yards, heavy volume, and then 2 passing touchdowns to 2 different receivers from Jordan Love. And I think you're looking really good.
By the way, so we're going to go to Rams plus 3.5 at the Lions, 51.5 point total there in a second. But if I wanted to stack that Rams Lions game in a big way, and I just wanted to be all over that particular game, can I take like Can I take Aaron Jones, run it back with CeeDee Lamb, and then just go to the Rams game? Is that viable for you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's go to that Rams plus 3.5 at the Lions. Again, 51.5 point total. I happen to know you like this game. First of all, you like the Rams in this game. We were on the early edge. You gave out the Rams money line. So you were foregoing. And by the way, this is down to 3, I think. I have it at plus 3.5, but it's down to 3, I believe. I like the Rams plus 3. You're willing to take them on the money line at like a plus 145, almost a plus 150 price. Talk to me about the DFS angle, though. Stafford, Goff. Do you like either side of this?
Yeah, I like weapons on the Lions side because, again, I have this number not quite flipped, but I make the Rams a better team. I think there's definitely a scenario where the Rams, I like them to win the game. So I think that I'm looking for a scenario where the Lions might actually be playing catch up. And when they're playing catch up, they pepper Amon-Ra St. Brown with targets. And that's what I think we see. He gets targets either way, he gets the volume. So he's clearly my favorite play here would be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I actually think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is insanely close to CeeDee Lamb in these particular games. I know CeeDee Lamb is a better player. He's going to get the football in his hands. I think there's scenarios, though, where Dallas is able to get others involved. I think Tony Pollard has an okay day against this Green Bay defense. So I actually prefer Amon-Ra straight up over CD when you factor the salary in. So that's my favorite way to play this game. As far as the Rams side, though, I prefer Stafford at quarterback, and I prefer to get all the weapons in there. So my favorite two are going to be DeMarcus Robinson and Cooper Kupp. A lot of people like Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua is fantastic. I think that opens things up for Cooper Kupp a little bit and DeMarcus Robinson. Matthew Stafford still has a great connection with Cooper Kupp. I think that he features him here. DeMarcus Robinson, though, at 3,600, simply too cheap. He is the forgotten man in this offense, can definitely be the deep ball target. Detroit, 24th in defensive EPA, surrenders a ton of explosive plays. Kyren Williams, very good on the ground. That is going to open up a few deep shots here. That's why I love DeMarcus Robinson. I'm playing him in almost every lineup at 3,600.
So talk to me about what a Stafford, like your primary Stafford stack, would it not include Kyren Williams? Would it really just be the passing and you're going Stafford to Cooper Kupp, DeMarcus Robinson?
Yeah, that's the build for now. I'll run you through one of my favorite. I'll just give you another full lineup right here. My favorite Stafford build that I have in right now is Stafford, Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, Cooper Kupp, DeMarcus Robinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jake Ferguson, and Josh Reynolds, and then the Bills defense.
I love that. Josh Reynolds, super sneaky considering, I don't think Khalif Raymond is healthy. Again, that's something we need to, when we get closer to game time, we need to investigate that. Jameson Williams probably coming back. But Josh Reynolds at 3,800 is a very interesting sort of value option. Let me ask you this, as far as Detroit goes, if we're not going to see Sam Laporta, does Mitchell or Brock Wright get into the conversation 2,800, 3,000?
I think they can, yes. Brock Wright is someone that in the past has been somewhat viable. I think the team's a little different now. It's probably more Mitchell. To be honest with you, what I think could happen if that happens, I think we could see more Jahmyr Gibbs just because he's an elite athlete and can catch the football. I think they could use him in the passing game a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And have some additional attention with the tight ends blocking more than running routes. But if Laporta doesn't play and we like the Rams as much as we do, I personally would build for the scripts where Detroit is trailing, which is why I like Reynolds so much. I think they're going to target him. You mentioned Raymond potentially not being out there. He's banged up for sure. Jameson Williams is someone we know his elite talent. I'm not confident he's going to be able to stay healthy. He's dealing with a number of injuries. He typically, we've seen it frequently from him, has a huge play or runs a deep route, pulls up with some sort of injury. I do not see him having the durability to play every snap. So I like Reynolds for that reason.
Okay. So let's talk about, before we move to Monday, the showdown slate, let's talk about the quarterbacks and maybe your preferred quarterback to stack, like from a ranking standpoint in these in the second and third game. And by that, I mean Packers, Cowboys, Rams, Lions. It sounds to me like your favorite quarterback to stack in this Sunday slate. Am I right that it's Matthew Stafford?
Yes. Stafford 1, Jordan Love 2, then Dak Prescott 3, and Jared Goff a very distant 4.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I love that. Stafford first. And again, DeMarcus Robinson, the value piece there. Anything else we missed? By the way, from an ownership standpoint, I got to think Kupp at what is he? He's 7,500. Puka Nacua is 7,200. I got to think Nacua is going to be the way more popular option. I don't know what the split is, or if you're looking at ownership, but Kupp's going to be far less owned than Puka Nacua. Yes.
Yeah, I'm showing Nacua around 35, 36%, and about 10% less on Cooper Kupp, around 25%. And keep in mind, it is a 3-game slate, so those sound like massive chalk numbers on a full game slate. Those are 25% on Cooper Kupp is the equivalent of playing him around 7%, I would say, on a normal slate. So yeah, it's very clearly Nacua. And then for the quarterbacks, by the way, I have Goff as my last quarterback. It makes sense because I'm betting the Rams. I'm on the Rams. Think they should be favored. Jared Goff is going to be the most popular quarterback used in DFS.
Wow. Okay. And the pieces, like you're willing to play Amon-Ra St. Brown, maybe some Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe some Josh Reynolds. You just prefer not to stack those guys with Goff.
Absolutely, yes. And part of the reason for this, if you watch the Lions too, they want to run the football. When they get to the red zone, we're going to see some Jahmyr Gibbs. We're going to see Montgomery. You could argue the same thing with Stafford and Kyron Williams, but I think that the Rams, with the explosive plays and the things that they have, their touchdown is not necessarily likely to come from the 4-yard line. The Lions far more likely to come from the 4-yard line. So he's the cheapest quarterback. He's the most popular. You get almost all the exposure via Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play St. Brown in every lineup. I'm not going to play Goff at all.
All right. I think we can move on to the Monday slate. By the way, Ellie asks, which game would you stack the most if you played the Saturday through Monday slate? Would that be the Rams for you, Mike?
For me, it'll be the Rams-Lions game the most. The Dallas-Green Bay game, there's a couple reasons. Number one, Dallas' defense has been pretty good. Green Bay, they can run the football a lot with Aaron Jones, so we know that we're going to have Aaron Jones in lineups because of the volume. But there is certainly a scenario where Jordan Love making his first playoff start could absolutely have a bad game. Short fields for Dallas, some Tony Pollard action. It's very possible that we get a very middling CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott game because of some of those scenarios. Meanwhile, I think Detroit and LA, I'm confident LA is going to score, and I'm confident that Detroit's going to throw the football to Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Speaking of, LaMelo Call asks if he's running a Jordan Love stack and he wants to get, like, it sounds like he's trying to get one piece of this Rams-Lions game, among others, but he's trying to decide between Kupp and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Would it be Amon-Ra St. Brown if he could only choose one?
If you can only choose one, it would be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think you have to play the guy, especially with the Laporta situation. If Laporta does go, there's a decent likelihood he doesn't finish the game. Amon-Ra St. Brown he's running a route on every snap, and he's the clear preferred target and an absolute warrior. You've seen him get hit many times in games, take one play off, right back out there. He's the guy you want.
All right. Let's move on to the Eagles and Buccaneers. But before we do that, let's hear a message from our partners.
There's no Belichickery here.
When Sunday football isn't enough.
Dislike that take.
Great take.
That other pregame show will put you over the tops.
I'm all in. Let's go viral here.
Every Sunday, all the insight you need on CBS Sports Network.
So we're probably not going to spend as much time on this Monday slate since it's only one game. And then after we cover that, we'll get to Mike's top 3 at each position, which is really covering mostly the Sunday slate, just so everybody knows that 3-game slate, which again is the flagship slate. We got the 2-game slate on Saturday, 3-game slate on Sunday, and of course, showdown on Monday. Mike, I got to say this right off the bat. I like the Buccaneers here, +3. I don't know that has any DFS implications, but I just think the Eagles, and this goes to DFS a little bit, I think they're so banged up. I don't think we're going to know until really maybe on Monday how healthy A.J. Brown is, how healthy Devontae Smith is, and how healthy Jalen Hurts is in terms of his ability to grip the football properly with that dislocation he had the other day. With all of that said, I mean, certainly a Jalen Hurts stack, I suppose it makes sense. How are you playing this game from a showdown standpoint?
Yeah, it's certainly a fascinating thing when you go to a showdown slate with these teams. It would be very interesting to have it not be a showdown slate with this game on there. So the thing that you mentioned with Jalen Hurts, not only gripping the football there, can he grip the football with that issue in the rain? I think it's going to be raining for this game. I think it's going to be wet field. I think it's going to be potentially wet during the actual game itself. So certainly something to watch that. As far as this game, we definitely need a little more info because it is a showdown slate and we're talking one game. That really, really changes things pretty drastically. Mm-hmm. As far as guys that I think that should be there, I think both defenses are in play. I know the Eagles defense has been pretty poor. I think the Bucs are going to still play a controlled game, and I think that it's going to be competitive there. Hurts, you're playing him in DFS in Showdown if he's in. Um, I wish I had more content for you on this, but until we know for sure, like I think AJ Brown's going to play. I think he's fine. He would be my preferred target because I think Hurts is going to have to get rid of the football quickly around the line of scrimmage, not so much deep shots. Other than that, it's jam Rashad White in there. The volume's going to be there. Price point's extreme, but I think you have to play him.
I know it's chalky, but doesn't it make sense to put Jalen Hurts in the captain spot, because he's probably just going to, especially if he's having issues throwing, and if AJ Brown and Devontae Smith are dinged up, I mean, he's just going to have to control almost like what we talked about with Josh Allen, where he could have a couple of rushing touchdowns easily and still have a throwing touchdown.
100%. Yeah. Like I said, no matter what the condition he is in, if he is out there, he's in the lineup for sure. And you could definitely make the case for him being in the captain spot. No doubt.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, again, I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this game because, again, we don't have a ton of information. If AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, I expect them to suit up. I just question how healthy they're going to be. That what looked like an MCL injury for AJ Brown, it looked significant enough for him to be very much impacted on Monday. And for the record, Devontae Smith, as far as I know, it's a high ankle sprain. So,
yeah,
we'll see how that goes. So on the other side, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, obviously all of them in play along with Rashad White. And then if you have to get cheap, I do think Trey Palmer, Cade Otton are decent. Just kind of if you have to throw in a cheap guy, do you have an opinion on either of those two guys, Mike?
Yeah, I think that both are certainly viable. I'm trying to think if I'm not getting a ton when I run here, but the reason I'm not getting a ton when I run them is because the defenses are projecting so well.
Gotcha.
They're not super expensive on this slate, which is the issue. Yeah, I think you're going to see a ton of defense ownership. I recommend playing them. So I'll give you a sample lineup back to what you said with Hurts being the captain.
Mm-hmm.
I could see a Hurts captain, Swift, assuming he's in, probably going to be, Rashad White, Chris Godwin, and then both defenses. I think that you get Hurts and all of his equity. You get Rashad White and Godwin on the other side. You're essentially fading big plays to Mike Evans in the elements. And then defenses, which you're betting on this game going under the total of 44.
Love that. All right, let's get to Mike's top three at each position. Again, this is going to be with respect to the Sunday slate. Mike, we pretty much talked about it. I asked you to rank the quarterbacks on the Sunday slate, but go ahead and recap it again. Who are your top three at the quarterback position?
Number one is going to be Matthew Stafford with the Rams, as someone listed in the chat. Can't tell if Mike likes the Rams this week or not. They're okay. I'll have a little exposure to the Rams. Number two, Jordan Love. I think he's got some upside in domes and controlled environments. Again, remember, not saying that the Packers are going to win this game. We're playing DFS here, which can be confusing sometimes to outcomes of games. There's definitely a scenario where the Packers lose this game and don't even cover the spread, and Jordan Love still outscores Dak Prescott. I think that that's very, very possible because of where the scoring will come from. And then my third is Dak Prescott. I'm basically playing those three, will not be playing any Jared Goff, who will be the most popular. When we go to
go ahead. No, I was going to say, don't forget, if you're at this part of the show and you're like, well, what about the Saturday slate? Go back because Mike and I, we talked about Mike in particular, what he likes in terms of the quarterback position on the Saturday slate. But go ahead with running back.
Running back, Aaron Jones is the top guy for me. I love the volume. 3 carries the last 3 games. Looks great. Again, controlled environment, helps some of the ball security issues he's had in his career. Number 2, Kyren Williams. Just the upside is phenomenal here for the Rams. I think that they're going to have their way. And then number 3, Tony Pollard. I think there's a number of scenarios where if Love doesn't play well or there are short fields, Tony Pollard does still have some goal line work here. So when we go to tight ends, very straightforward here for me. Jake Ferguson, Tucker Kraft, Tyler Higbee. Higbee got the questionable tag, so obviously monitor that. Ferguson, the top guy here for me, though. I want some exposure to Dallas. I think he's the guy that the price points just, it makes a ton of sense. And then Tucker Kraft, he's been a target that's been reliable for Jordan Love.
Receiver, though, I think you skipped over a receiver.
I did. That's embarrassing. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the receiver, definitely not the most important position where you have to pick 3 of them or anything. Like we don't need to cover that. Amon-Ra St. Brown, number 1 here for me. I think the volume is certainly going to be there. I also think Detroit's playing catch up a bit in this game. So that's where he thrives. And then the other 2 I've listed are going to be Cooper Kupp and Demarcus Robinson, the 2 weapons for Matthew Stafford. Demarcus Robinson has been phenomenal, and no attention is going to get paid to him at all when you have to defend Kyron Williams out of the backfield, Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua. Deep shots multiple times to Demarcus Robinson. So I still like CeeDee Lamb. For those wondering, well, how is CeeDee Lamb not my top 3 receivers? These are top 3 in terms of my overall exposure. I'm electing to play more Amon-Ra than CD. I'm still definitely playing CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, that's a good disclaimer there. I might have to look at some Demarcus Robinson props. I haven't looked at props for the Sunday slate yet, but there's certainly a few guys I have my eye on. Perhaps Aaron Jones overs as well. Although the market's wise to Aaron Jones volume, so maybe there's no value in those. Yeah. But by the way, if you're Sportsline members, those props get put on Sportsline along with sides and totals that I like. Greg Gousset says, "Happy Super Wildcard weekend, everyone! Great show, guys. Really, really appreciate that." Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be our show. Mike, any final comments before we get out of here? Obviously, the structure for those of you listening, the structure of the show is a little different because normally Mike and I come on and we have one slate to talk about. It's like 10 or 11 or sometimes 13 games. Well, it's a little different because the slates are fractured. The days that these games happen are fractured. And so we had to approach it a little bit differently. So hopefully you were able to kind of catch up with everything we like on Saturday and on Sunday and on Monday. With that said, Mike, any closing words before we get out of here?
Yeah, just keep in mind, you can be extremely contrarian. And if you're using an optimizer to build, be sure to change the settings to allow a defense against your quarterback on these small slates. It happens quite frequently because there is not the strong negative correlation that you think when there's only 2 games to pick from. So do that. Don't be afraid to leave some additional salary on the table. It's the best way to get different and unique in the tournaments.
And Reno, you say, what is your favorite lineup blend? Saturday, Sunday, Monday, all. So the way DraftKings did it, it's a little weird how they did it. So I'm probably going to end up playing the 2-game Saturday slate, the 3-game Sunday slate, and then a little bit of showdown on Monday. So I'm just going to basically, in terms of my lineup blend, and I think this is what you're asking, I'm going to be just doing whatever's happening that day. That's what my DraftKings sort of lineups are going to be. So Commanders picked a GM, Greg Gousset says. Why does DK fracture the slates like this? I'm not 100% sure. I thought they'd have one like featured one with all three days. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, there's one reason. It is to make money. It's to make money because there's a significant portion, bigger players that are max entering or entering big volume, and you're giving them the opportunity to do that 3 times instead of 1. So that is typically why. It's the same reason the NFL has Thursday Night Football, Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football. Standalone games get more attention and make more money.
Yeah. Why only take 1 rake when you can take 3 rakes? So very smart observation there, Mike McClure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get out of here. Thank you for being in the show. Thanks for hitting the like button. Thanks for reviewing the podcast. All those things that you do, we really appreciate it. We got more to talk about on Tuesday. We'll do a little bit of a recap, and then we'll look forward or look ahead to the next week of NFL games as we get smaller and smaller in terms of the number of games that we need to assess. This has been Fantasy Football Today, DFS, and we'll see you soon.